Welcome. As the title says, this is a very basic introduction to luminosity masks. What are they? And I'll give a demonstration on this image, how I would edit this image. And as you can see up the top here of my histogram, when I shot this, I always want to expose my highlights correctly without clipping the image, because my highlights is really important in my images, because I don't want to overexpose the sky, because once you overexpose a color, it just washes out, and if you clip an image, you're not going to get that material back, or those pixels back. It's just going to be white. So you can see my histogram, I've really pushed that histogram to the right. You can see my clipping warnings are actually on, and there's no clipping in this image in the highlights. You can see my blue, there's a little bit of clipping in the shadows, but I can get rid of that very quickly in a few minutes. So this bit about this image, I had no filters on this image, no polarizer, no NDs, no grad filters. This is just a naked lens. So you can see my 10mm lens, or it's actually a crop sensor camera, so that would be what, 15mm in a full frame. f16, just because I wanted my foreground on focus through to my background. And my base ISO for my camera is this camera is 160. So I look at my images and I'm really happy with my exposure. I've got everything in this image that I need to make a good image. If I was shooting into a brighter light, because this would have been at least 20 minutes, 30 minutes before sunrise. So you can see that was shot by 15 seconds. So if it was a lot brighter or more contrasty, I would look at my histogram, push the brights to the right side, but if it was still packed up on the left, I would go and shoot another correctly exposed image for the shadows. And that might mean shooting 2 images or 3 images, depending on the scene. So this image, I managed to get it in one shot. So let's just do some basic edits. I don't do too much edits on my image. Now this is a raw file, so I know that the colors in there, I can pull out a lot of detail, exposure. I can bring these shadows up because I shoot in raw. If I was shooting in JPEG, an 8-bit file, you can if you start pushing your images, like you're opening your shadows further, and you can actually create banding in your images, and it can damage that file. So shooting 16 bits gives you more latitude to edit your images safely. So let's come in, and what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to actually bring my highlights even down further, because I know if I bring these highlights down, I'm going to introduce just some more color into the image. So what I'm going to do is just come up to my highlights slider and just pull that to the left, and you just watch that, those highlights will come down, but look at the color that's coming back into the image. And now I'm going to pull that right to the left as far as it can go, so that's a -100. And then my shadows, obviously I want to open my shadows up, so I can come to my shadow slider and pull that to the right, just left clicking and holding my button down and just pulling to the right. And you can see it's just opening all my shadow area really nicely. And my blacks, I just want to open those up slightly. So now you can see my clipping along that area under the hull layer is gone. And you can look at my histogram. I've got a little bit of space. So really there's no clipping in the blacks, and there's probably 2 or 3 mil on my highlight side. So I'm really happy with that. So let's come down. We could, look, you can put some texture or clarity into your images. So I'm not going to do any of that. Tone curve. Look, tone curve's quite interesting, because you can come in and you can target highlights and lights and darks. But for me, I find luminosity masks is a lot more precise, and you can adjust your adjustment layers, like your curves and your layers, to those masks. Where here it's kind of a, it just targets kind of broader areas on that area. Hue, saturation, and luminance. I'm not going to touch anything in this. I like doing my color work in Photoshop. Color grading, no details. Yep, look, let's just put this back to default. So I'll bring my radius down a little bit, my detail I'll bring up, and I just look for, you know, something that's got some nice edge to it. There's some rope, maybe this up here, and I'm just going to come in and just add some sharpening by eye. So I just come in, I don't go too much. I'm just looking at that rope there, and that's about it. So around about 57. And lens corrections, no, they're on all the time, and I'm not going to touch anything else in this image. So let's bring this into Photoshop. So I'm just left clicking, edit in Photoshop. It'll take a few seconds for Photoshop to open. Let's just open that up, and we can see here this is the free luminosity panel you can get. Now if you go to Tony Kuiper's website, you can download that panel for free. So if you just go to Tony's page, come down to buy panels and videos, you can just scroll down and get that panel here. So if you just click on get them here, they're free, and you can practice on your own images. If you want to take these images or these luminosity masks further, if you see they're quite powerful, I'd highly recommend coming down and maybe investing into the full panel, which I'll show you in a minute. And for this price, this is in US dollars, you'll get Sean Bagshaw's TK8 video guide. Sean's a great teacher, and I've purchased a couple of Sean's videos over the years, and he is a great teacher. So let's just pop that down, and let's have a look at this image. So you can see on the right here, this is the full panel, the TK8 paid for version. And this is the free version. You can see here you've got this this button open interface for making presets, lights or darks, and that's the same box here. But this box here has got a few more additions to it. So what you can do, if you just click on this mask, it opens up a Lights 1 luminosity mask. Now you can see here it's highlighted with green. So on from 1 to 6, this is your lights side, and 1 to 6 on the left is your darks luminosity masks. So you can just come through, and you can see on each mask it comes more refined and more refined. So what am I seeing here? So obviously this is your brights, because this is your sky, and your darks is down here, and that's totally blocked out. But if I attach this mask to an adjustment layer like a levels or a curves, and use those sliders to say bring down exposure, it's only going to bring down exposure in the brightest parts, and it's feathered, and it'll start feathering down until it gets up to nothing. So it's not going to affect the boat. When I darken this image, it's not going to darken the boat any further. It's just going to darken the brightest areas, maybe this water through here, the mid-tones. But I can continue to come down and say, well, maybe that's too broad. I really just want to target that area or that area. Now the opposite is true if you come into your darks. This is your darks 1, so it's quite broad. So the opposite is true. The lighter areas or the white areas will be adjusted. So if I wanted to bring up the shadows or bring down the shadows through an adjustment layer, if I brought the shadows up, this will be a quite broad mask, because all the white areas I would lighten everything. So I'd kind of flatten the image and make it less contrasty. So, but if I continue to come to a lights 2, now if I did that same adjustment, it's not going to lighten the sky at all, because that's black. And I can continue to come through and choose a mask to say, okay, I just want to target these port side of this boat. Maybe the grass is through here, just lighten up those areas. It's up to you. When you edit, it's up to you. So let's go back to a lights 1, and let's bring the sky down. So what I would do, I'd come in and maybe go, look, actually lights 2, lights 3. But let's start with a 3 and attach that to, we've got a choice down here. They're giving you a couple of adjustment layers. On the paid for version, you've got a few more. So let's go use a curves adjustment layer. Now over in your layers panel on the right, you can see that luminosity mask, which we just created, is now attached to a curve. So any adjustment, just open that, any adjustment through this curves, it's only going to adjust through that lights. So what I could do, I could just grab this linear line here and bring it down, or I can use this tool here. If I click on it and come over and choose a spot, say this area here that I want to bring down, click on it, left click and hold it and drag down, you can see that curves coming down. And if I turn that off and on, I zoom in, it's only adjusting the lighter parts which I've chosen, and the water's being adjusted at the same time. But my shadow's not darkening, my shadows are still staying the shadows. Now if the edit was done, this edit here that I've just done was not done through a mask, if I hold the left shift key down and click on that, that's what the edit would look like without that mask. If I just, so that's the edit I did, but without that mask, this is what it looks like. So if I turn that luminosity mask back on by holding the left shift key and clicking that luminosity mask, that's it there. Now I could come back and say, you know, I really just want to target maybe just this area here. So I can come in and say, look, I might go to a 4 and output that maybe as a levels adjustment. So once again, it's attached itself to the levels, and you can see the brightness through this mask, and it's less here. So if I hit the Alt key, it's only going to adjust through those lighter areas. So let's just bring that up and maybe use the midtones slider and just come in and bring that heat off the sky a bit more. So it's probably pretty hard to see through the video. I just grab hold of it, bring that down. If I turn that off and on, you can see it's just targeting through this area. So some beautiful color through there. So that's it. So there's 2 luminosity masks on the light side. Now I might want to say, okay, I want to just lighten up these shadows area. So what we can do is just come through and we can choose a mask, and the choice is yours. You can lighten and darken any area that you want. So let's just say, yep, that looks okay. I'm going to really open the shadows up in these areas, or you can be more restrictive, and we'll output that as a levels. And you can see here it's just on the shadow side, because that's what it's showing on here. It's just my shadows area. And we could come in and maybe use the midtone slider and just open up those shadows. You can see visually the foreground is really opening up. You could bring your brights if you want over, and even though I'm using my brights, it's not brightening the sky because it's being restricted in the mask, because it's blacked out. The mask is holding back the sky. So yeah, so with the paid panel, you can actually, it's got a great little feature. It's kind of a clipping warning feature. I can turn that off and on. So if I turn the clipping warning feature up, I can see there's no clipping in this image at all. If there was clipping, there would be blue in the shadow and red in the sky, but there's no clipping in this image at all. So probably final thing would be on this mask that you do have some mid-tone masks down here. And even though this image is fairly flat, if I just choose a mid-tone mask, so that really mid-tones just target the mid-tones in the image. It kind of looks after the shadows and the highlights so you don't clip it. So we can come in and make look, we'll just go with the lights 2 and we'll output that to a levels. And you can see here in the histogram, it's just targeting those mid-tones, and there's a lot of mid-tones in this image. So I probably wouldn't use a mid-tone mask in this image, but once again, you can come in and it just looks after those mid-tones. It leaves those highlights alone and it leaves those shadows alone. It just really targets that area. So once again, you can come in and play with that. So yeah, that's good. So that is probably, maybe a bit of overload or for some people, but if you can persevere with the luminosity mask, you'll notice a big improvement in your images. So I would continue on and do some color work on this image. I'd probably just maybe a little bit of cropping, maybe a bit more sharpening, and that's it. So hopefully this image has helped someone to get interested in luminosity masks. And so look, thanks for watching.